Leviticus. Chapter 13. Laws concerning leprosy. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes an infection of leprosy on the skin of his body, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the infection on the skin of the body, and if the hair in the infection has turned white and the infection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is an infection of leprosy. When the priest has looked at him, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body, and it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair on it has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the infected person for 7 days. The priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if in his eyes the infection has not changed and the infection has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him for 7 more days. The priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the infection has faded and the infection has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab. And he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spreads farther on the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again to the priest. The priest shall look, and if the scab has spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When there is a leprous infection on a man, he shall be brought to the priest. The priest shall look, and if there is a white swelling on the skin, and it has turned the hair white, and there is quick raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic leprosy on the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. But if the leprosy spreads out over the skin so that it covers all the skin of the infected person from his head even to his feet, as far as the priest can see, then the priest shall look, and if the leprosy has covered his entire body, he shall pronounce clean him who has the infection. It has all turned white, and he is clean. But whenever raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. The priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. The raw flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. But if the raw flesh changes and turns white, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. If the infection has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce clean him who has the infection, and he is clean. If there is a boil on the skin of his body and it is healed, and in the place of the boil there is a white swelling or a reddish-white bright spot, he shall be shown to the priest. And the priest shall look, and if it appears deeper than the skin and the hair has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection of leprosy. It has broken out in the boil. But if the priest examines it and there is no white hair in it and it is not deeper than the skin and is faded, then the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads farther on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection. But if the bright spot stays in its place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Also, if there is a burn on the skin of his body and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall examine it. If the hair in the bright spot has turned white and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy. It has broken out in the burn. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection of leprosy. But if the priest examines it and there is no white hair in the bright spot and it is not deeper than the skin and is faded, then the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine him, and if it has spread farther on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection of leprosy. But if the bright spot remains in its place and has not spread on the skin and has faded, it is merely a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burn. When a man or a woman has an infection on the head or on the beard, then the priest shall examine the infection, and if it appears deeper than the skin and there is in it a thin yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection, a leprosy of the head or beard. But if the priest examines the infection of the scaly infection, and it does not appear deeper than the skin and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the person with the scaly infection for 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the infection, and if the scaly infection has not spread and there is no yellow hair in it and the scaly infection does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but he shall not shave the scaly infection. And the priest shall isolate the person with the scaly infection for 7 more days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the scaly infection, and if it has not spread on the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scaly infection spreads farther on the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him, and if the scaly infection has spread on the skin, the priest need not look for the yellow hair, he is unclean. But if in his sight the scaly infection has stayed and black hair has grown in it, the scaly infection is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When a man or woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, even white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and if the bright spots on the skin of the body are faded white, it is a rash that has broken out on the skin, he is clean. If a man loses the hair of his head, he is bald, he is clean. And if his head becomes bald at the front and sides, he is bald on the forehead, he is clean. But if there is a reddish-white infection on the bald head or the bald forehead, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine him, and if the swelling of the infection is reddish-white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, like the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean, his infection is on his head. As for the leper who has the infection, his clothes shall be torn, and the hair of his head shall be uncovered, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean. Unclean. He shall remain unclean all the days during which he has the infection. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. When a garment has a leprous infection in it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether in warp or woof of linen or of wool, whether in leather or in any article made of leather, if the infection is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, or in the warp or in the woof, or in any article of leather, it is a leprous infection and shall be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the infection and isolate the article with the infection for 7 days. He shall examine the infection on the 7th day. If the infection has spread in the garment, in the warp or in the woof, or in the leather, whatever the purpose for which the leather is used, the infection is a leprous malignancy, it is unclean. He shall therefore burn the garment, whether the warp or the woof, in wool or in linen, or any article of leather in which the infection occurs, for it is a leprous malignancy, it shall be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it and the infection has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in any article of leather, then the priest shall order them to wash the thing in which the infection has occurred, and he shall isolate it for 7 more days. After the article with the infection has been washed, the priest shall examine it again, and if the infection has not changed its color even though the infection has not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in the fire. It is a rotting infection, whether on the inside or on the outside. Then if the priest examines it and the infection has faded after it has been washed, he shall tear it out of the garment or the leather, whether from the warp or from the woof. If it appears again in the garment, whether in the warp or in the woof or in any article of leather, it is an outbreak. You shall burn with fire the article in which the infection occurs. But the garment, whether the warp or the woof or any article of leather from which the infection departs when you have washed it, it shall be washed a 2nd time and will be clean. This is the law for the infection of leprosy in a garment of wool or linen, whether in the warp or in the woof, or in any article of leather, for pronouncing it clean or unclean. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.